Good evening. Thanks for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. Operation Sindoor sets the Indian defence manufacturing juggernaut rolling. Sources say the government may hike its defence budget next year. Industry expects replenishment orders worth up to 40,000 crores. Defence stocks add over 1.5 lakh crore rupees to their market capitalisation since the start of Operation Sindoor. India and Pakistan to decide to extend the stoppage of military action. Defence Minister says India will keep Pakistan on probation until its behaviour improves. Prime Minister Modi meets top ministers at his official residence, even as the Indian government considers sending a multi-party delegation to various countries to present India's stance. Turkish ground handling service provider Çelebi moves the Delhi High Court against a revocation of its security clearance by the government of India, says the move will hurt over 3,000 jobs. But sources say Indian airports have begun roping in other service providers to replace Çelebi. The company's shares plunged 10% in the Turkish markets. CNBC TV 18 exclusive. Vodafone Idea urges the government to support its funding attempts, says banks have not been forthcoming despite a 26,000 crore rupee equity infusion, and the government becoming a 49% stakeholder warns it may have to file for insolvency if this continues. The RBI board is likely to meet on the 23rd of May to consider a dividend payout to the government. Economists tell CNBC TV 18 this year's surplus transfer may top 2.5 lakh crore rupees on account of forex operations and bond purchases. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal is set to visit the US to steer negotiations on the bilateral trade deal. Sources say he will assess the progress made at the delegation level over the last 2 months. He will meet with his counterpart Howard Lutnick and US Trade Representative Jameson Greer. President Trump wraps up his 3-day West Asia visit by signing a flurry of deals worth over $200 billion with the UAE. The three-nation trip has yielded deals worth over $2 trillion, claims the White House. Israel steps up military operations in Gaza and the West Bank a day after US President Trump refloats his idea of changing Gaza into a freedom zone. Reports say over 120 Palestinians have died in the attacks in the last 48 hours. No significant breakthrough in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine in Turkey. The first direct peace talks between the two warring nations in over 3 years lasted close to 2 hours. A source of the Ukrainian side tells Reuters that Moscow's demands were detached from reality. Well, let's start with the market action. The Indian market saw huge gains this week, and what a surprise that's turned out to be given the week that we've seen. The Sensex and the Nifty up 4% each. That's the story that's played out for the Nifty over the week. 4% higher, almost a 7% gain there as far as the mid-cap index is concerned. The Sensex up by almost 4% as well. So we've seen a strong close, not just for the day, but for the week as far as our markets go. But the big story that we continue to track, India and Pakistan have decided to continue to extend the military stoppage, but Operation Sindoor is not over yet. That is the India point of view. The Indian Army has said that confidence-building measures to reduce alertness levels will continue. Meanwhile, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh visited the Bhuj Air Force Station to review operations. Bhuj, in fact, was one of the military sites that Pakistan attempted to attack last week. The Defence Minister warned that India has kept Pakistan on probation until its behaviour improves. He's also called upon the IMF to reconsider providing financial assistance to Pakistan. As he says, Pakistan has once again started to rebuild its terror infrastructure. Prime Minister Modi met with top ministers at his residence at a time when the government is considering sending a delegation of lawmakers across parties to represent India's position on Pakistan to countries like the UK, US and others. This, of course, is something that the government is working on in partnership with other political parties. Here's Jairam Ramesh.
निश्चित रूप से इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड से आने वाले $1 बिलियन के बड़े हिस्से को टेरर इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को फंड करने में इस्तेमाल होगा, ऐसा मेरा मानना है। इसलिए मैं मानता हूं कि आज के समय में पाकिस्तान को किसी भी तरह की आर्थिक सहायता टेरर फंडिंग से कम नहीं है। भारत यही चाहेगा कि IMF पाकिस्तान को अपनी $1 बिलियन की असिस्टेंस पर वह पुनर्विचार करे।
सरकार की ओर से अगर कोई इनविटेशन आता है, कोई मांग आती है कि एक बहुदलीय प्रतिनिधिमंडल में कांग्रेस पार्टी भी शामिल हो, हम ज़रूर शामिल होंगे और जो कुछ हमें करना है हम करेंगे। राष्ट्रीय हित सर्वोपरि है।
किरण रिजिजू जी ने फ़ोन किया था, बोला आपको 22 या 23 तारीख को जाना पड़ेगा 10 दिन के लिए। इतना था कि मेरे पास जानकारी है, इसका आगे कुछ नहीं है। जैसे सरकार जो काम हमारा ऊपर सौंपेगी वो काम हम निभाने का कोशिश करेंगे। आई एम रेडी टू सर्व द नेशन एज एंड व्हेन आई विल बी डायरेक्टेड। भारत किसी भी कीमत से इस सीमा पार आतंकवाद को उखाड़ कर फेंक देना चाहते हैं।
And continuing with Operation Sindoor, India's defence budget is expected to be increased next fiscal to bolster the country's arsenal. Sources tell CNBC TV 18 the defence industry is expecting replenishment orders worth 30 to 40,000 crore rupees. Parikshit joins us now to tell us what he is picking up. Parikshit, thanks very much for joining us. All of the ammunition, the arms that we have used through the course of Operation Sindoor, these will now need to be replenished. What are you hearing from industry? What's the expectation, the estimates that they're factoring in, both in terms of replenishment as well as any emergency procurement?
India's defence budget, Shireen, has been on the rise. We've seen how in FY26 budget, the defence outlay was 6.8 lakh crore. That is 9.5% over FY25 higher. If you look at the acquisition budget, the capital outlay, it was 1.8 lakh crore, up 4.5% over FY25. The modernization budget in terms of what you're acquiring from domestic industries, that was as high as 1.2 lakh crore. What we are spending on infrastructure assets and R&D is around 31,000 crore rupees. Now, all of that is set to increase because of what we've seen in Operation Sindoor. Just a word on the exports as well. It's an important story. 24,000 crore worth of exports in FY25, and this could go up all the way to 50,000 crore by 2029. Having said that, yes, there is a lot of chatter within the Defence Ministry for emergency procurements and also replenishing the ammunition stocks which have been depleted. In fact, industry estimates suggest that we could be looking at orders worth 39 to 40,000 crores in the coming few weeks. The focus of the government, what we learn from sources, will be a lot on loitering munitions, AI-guided munitions, having stealth equipment, more drones, having a supply chain for low-cost, smart ammunitions, alternatives for the Scalp missile, Hammer missile, which we acquire from Israel and other nations for a very high cost. You need to have a domestic supply chain where you can get all of this very quickly. Strengthen your radar systems. Companies like L&T, Bharat Forge, Zen Technologies, drone makers, they will be in focus. And finally, having a strong base, development and manufacturing of hypersonic missiles, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. This seems to be focus for the next few months and years.
Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. As Parikshit was taking us through what industry expects, let's listen in to some of the big voices from industry on their estimates.
With the policies that the Honorable Prime Minister put into place for the last, let's say, 10 years in the area of defense, and all enabled by our Honorable Defense Minister and the whole user industry collaborative effort that is going on between industry, DRDO, and the users, that is the services, we are all moving forward at a very rapid pace. I mean, there are a lot of things that you don't see that are happening in industry, but I can tell you and assure you that we are moving forward at extremely rapid pace. And this is not only good for our defense, but is also good for our overall economic and industrial development.
Air defense is something that we are looking at quite strongly. We have been associated with the Akash program, and many of the ground equipment for the Akash we are involved with. We are looking at close-in weapon systems, given the thrust on drone warfare. So we have our own close-in weapon systems, which we are now contracted with the Air Force for. And that's one area that we would like to scale up and speed up.
And more on the defense team. Defense stocks after Operation Sindoor have been on a tear. Top companies, including PSUs and private players, have added over 1.5 lakh crore rupees to their market capitalization since the 7th of May, with their stocks gaining anywhere between 15 and 40%. My colleague Surbhi Upadhyay is joining us now. Surbhi, self-reliance clearly is the new war cry, but also in many ways a coming-of-age story for India's defence industry.
Operation Sindoor has literally announced the coming of age of the Indian defense manufacturing ecosystem. And it's an ecosystem that has a lot of private sector players and, of course, the big PSU giants. Let me start by telling you about some of the weapon systems that were deployed in Operation Sindoor. We're talking about, of course, the missiles, the medium-range surface-to-air missiles, MRSAMs as they're called. Bharat Dynamics is a very key player here, not only when it comes to manufacturing these missiles, but it's a full systems integrator, and it played a huge part. The Akash weapon system, which we all know, which was critical in Operation Sindoor. This is a weapon system that has suppliers, across a long supply chain. So when it comes to the outer shell, it was manufactured by a company called Paras Defense. When we're talking about the warheads and the initiating systems, then Solar Industries was the name that was in play. And once again, Bharat Dynamics was the key systems integrator over here. The Nagastra loitering munitions, this was a war that was fought in the sky with drones, and the anti-drone systems came into play as well. And here, Nagastra 1 and 2, which is what Solar has been manufacturing, that was, in key play. I want to talk about some numbers as well, the size of the opportunity in the industry. The projected estimated output by the Indian defense sector for FY25 is 1.75 lakh crore rupees. That number is expected to swell, or was expected to swell, to 3 lakh crore rupees by FY29. But a lot of analysts that we've been speaking to say that these targets will be hit much earlier now because the production is being ramped up, because companies are running on double and in some cases triple shifts. So all of this is getting accelerated. 193 contracts signed by the Ministry of Defense in FY25, and a whopping 92% of those actually went to domestic suppliers. By value, this is number of contracts. By value, 80% of the contracts by value actually went to local manufacturers. So that's really saying something about the extent of our Atmanirbharta. I just want to quickly talk about some of the names here. Many of them you already know. Bharat Dynamics, like I said, when it comes to missile systems, and it's right up there. It's also a key systems integrator. BEL, when it comes to defense communication and electronics. It's a big player in of course, in the Akash new age weapon system, land-based radars, naval systems, tanked armored vehicles, and all the electronic systems that go there. BEL plays a part. HAL needs no introduction, whether it's the Su-30s or the other aircraft. It recently won a massive order, HAL, 62,700 crore rupee order for the light combat aircraft that it will deliver both to the Indian Air Force as well as to the Army. And then, of course, Mazgaon Dock, Garden Reach Shipbuilders, Cochin Shipyard, the frigates, the destroyers, the corvettes, all of them being manufactured locally right here in India. But it's not just the PSUs. The private sector players are really, notching up the game as well. Of course, there are giants like Tata Advanced Systems, which are, into a range of weapon systems, whether it's launchers, artillery gun systems for the Akash surface-to-air missile systems. There's also the, advanced towed artillery gun systems, the ATAGS as it's called, and of course, a range of other optronics, radars, etc. Solar Industries, like I mentioned, when it comes to warheads and bombs, then this is a key emerging player. In fact, whether you talk about missile systems like, BrahMos or many of the others, the Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launchers, Solar is a big player in a lot of these projects, and it's a big supplier. Astra Microwave, big name when it comes to radars and electronic warfare systems. And then there is Paras Defense as well. Again, the rocket and missile programs, warfare, surveillance, naval systems, tanks, and armored vehicles. This is not a fully exhaustive list, by the way. There are many other companies, many other SMEs as well. But the entire ecosystem when it comes to defense, self-reliant manufacturing, indeed thriving now in India.
Surabhi, many thanks. That's a quick snapshot of where things currently stand as far as India's defence industry is concerned. Now, shares of Chelby plunged 10% in Istanbul after the Indian government revoked the security clearance of its Indian subsidiary. What will this mean for the company's employees in India? Our colleague Madiha is standing by now to explain. Madiha, what does this also mean for airports who are in business with Chelby? Many have decided to move forward with other players. Mumbai in specific has appointed somebody else, and also we're given to understand that Chelby has decided to exercise legal recourse in India.
Exactly. Now, sources have confirmed to CNBC TV18 that Mumbai International Airport has signed an agreement with ground handling company Indo-Thai to take over the employees and assets of Chelby Aviation. The development comes after the Bureau of Civil Aviation and Security revoked the security clearance of the company, citing national security concerns after Turkey expressed its support to Pakistan. Sources said that Indo-Thai has received BCAS approval to operate ground handling services at the Mumbai airport. airport. So nearly 3,000 Celebi employees will be moved to Indo-Thai, and new entry permits, airport entry permits will be issued under the new employer's name. To make the transition smooth, the BCAS extended the validity of the AEPs, which is the airport entry permits, till the 19th of May to have enough time for remaking the new permits. Now, Indo-Thai provides ground handling services at multiple airports in India, including Pune, Kolkata, Amritsar, Varanasi, Calicut, Bhubaneswar, Guwahati and Jaipur. Among the 9 airports that Celebi was operating at, Mumbai Airport, like you mentioned, is the only one to get a new company to replace Celebi. Other airports, including Delhi International Airport, have assigned the existing handlers, that is ASL, AI SATs and Bird Worldwide Flight Services, to absorb Celebi's staff and take over the assets. We had reported earlier that government policy mandates an airport having passenger volumes of over 10 million, they should have 3 ground handling companies. So Celebi was present at the 9 airports along with 2 more players, either AIASL, AI SATs or Bird Worldwide Flight Services. So for the first, for the time being, 2 companies will handle Celebi's operation, including airports like Delhi Airport, until a new ground handler is appointed. But at Mumbai Airport, the third operator, because Mumbai Airport has AIASL and Bird, so the third operator, which is Indo-Thai, is already being appointed.
All right, Madhya, many thanks for joining us. Now, Chelbi Airport Services, as per Reuters, has moved the Delhi High Court against the government's decision to revoke its security clearance. Reuters says that Chelbi has highlighted that the clearance was revoked without any warning and without elaborating how the company was a threat to India's national security. Chelbi has warned that close to 4,000 jobs will be impacted and investor confidence will also be hit. The court did not set aside if the court did not set aside the Indian government's decision, the matter is yet to be taken up. CNBC TV 18 exclusive tonight. Cash-strapped Vodafone Idea has urged the government to support its funding attempts yet again. Sources have told CNBC TV 18 that if the company fails to receive support from banks and the government, it will have no choice but to file an insolvency plea in the NCLT, impacting more than 200 million subscribers. Ashmit joins us now. Ashmit, what does this now mean for Vodafone Idea? And more importantly, where does this leave the government? Does it even have a choice in the matter? It's a 49% shareholder.
Well, just yesterday, we were the first to report that Vodafone Idea has filed a fresh application in the Supreme Court seeking a waiver of the interest and penalty dues. Now we learn is that before filing this fresh application, there was a last knock on the door of the government by Vodafone Idea, a letter being going from Vodafone Idea to the DOT, where a bleak picture, a gloomy picture has been given to the government. Vodafone Idea saying that without government help, the company could very well be heading into insolvency, will not be able to sustain operations beyond FY26. Now, in this letter, Vodafone Idea essentially says that without the government coming on board, despite the promoters having pumped in 26,000 crores, the banks are not willing to come on board. There is no capex. The operations becomes difficult, and therefore FY26 doesn't look feasible. Beyond that, the letter also then goes on to say that the insolvency, if it happens as far as Vodafone Idea is concerned, that will be bad for all stakeholders, saying that even for the government, which is a 49% shareholder, the value of that shareholding will come to naught. The recovery of 1.18 lakh crore rupees of spectrum dues, that will come to naught, of course hurting the government. 200 million customers will get impacted. Digital India mission will get impacted. And on the back of this, saying that this is the line in the sand that we're drawing, the government needs to come up. Without that, we're looking at the private players shrinking from 3 to 2, that Vodafone Idea will head into insolvency, no operations beyond FY26. The government, however, on its part believes that because of the Supreme Court's AGR judgment, its hands are tied.
Ashmit, many thanks for joining us. This is going to be a tough one for the government. Now, the RBI board is likely to meet on the 23rd of May to consider its dividend payout to the government. Economists tell CNBC TV 18 that this year's surplus transfer may top 2.5 lakh crore rupees. Sapna is standing by with more in this exclusive story. Sapna, economists expecting another bumper dividend payout this year. It's a broad range that they're working at, from 2.5 lakh crores all the way to 3.5 lakh crores.
Well, economists are extremely positive that the RBI dividend that will come to the government sometime next week is going to be materially higher. And there are two key drivers that they're talking about. First, of course, are the forex operations of RBI, and plus also their bond purchases in terms of liquidity infusion that have been happening since the last couple of months. But having said that, well, I'll come to that just in a minute. In terms of the numbers, well, basically 2.5 lakh odd crore to 3.5 lakh odd crore is what the street is expecting in terms of the surplus transfer from RBI to the Government of India. Now, in terms of the reasons, coming back to that, so in terms of the forex operations of RBI, everybody knows that the volume has been much higher in the last financial year as compared to what it was in FY24. But if you look at FY24, it was around 150 billion odd dollars, 150 billion worth of dollar sales by RBI, on which they got around exchange gains of somewhere around 84,000 crores. Versus that, what economists are saying is that the dollar sales in the financial year gone by have really jumped by 2.5 times. So somewhere around 375 billion odd dollars worth of sales have actually happened by have been done by RBI. So against that, the exchange gains are going to be humongous. That's what the street expectation is. That's one aspect. Second, also in terms of the bond purchases that have happened basically to smoothen out liquidity, over 1 lakh crore easily. So there is some interest income that has come from banks to the RBI. So these two could be the key drivers. We have to also, of course, look at the investment portfolio in terms of how the yields have behaved in terms of the exposure to US T-bills. Having said all of this, there are other implications also of this RBI dividend number. Basically, with so much of liquidity that is expected to come in, it may just be possible that from the second quarter onwards, the open market operations may actually come down. This is the third expectation of economists across the board. So we'll have to wait and watch and see what really happens on that May 23rd RBI board meeting in Bombay. And last word in terms of the economic capital framework, also there's a lot of talk that a review has already happened. We'll have to wait and watch and see whether additional risk buffer will be required and what kind of impact that has on the final payout to the Government of India.
Well, has been a substantial cushion for the government and is expected to be the case this time around as well. May 23rd is likely when we will know what that number is in terms of the RBI's dividend. Many thanks, Sapna, for joining us. Up next on India Business Hour, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal to visit the US to steer negotiations on the bilateral trade deal. He will assess the progress made by the delegation-level talks. Catch all of CNBC TV 18's news and updates on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X and Jio Hotstar. Ozempic maker Novo Nordisk has said that its CEO Lars Jorgensen will step down. The weight loss drug company cited the decline in the company's share price as a reason for the exit. The firm's stock has fallen more than 50% since the middle of 2024. But this after rallying significantly. Also, this after the prescription for the competitor's Eli Lilly obesity drugs surpassed that of Novo Nordisk. Jorgensen will remain in his post until a new CEO is chosen. The pharma giant said that search for a replacement is currently underway. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal will travel to the US to steer negotiations on the proposed India-US bilateral trade deal. Sources say that the Commerce Minister will assess the progress made by the delegation-level talks that have taken place over the last 2 months. Abhimanyu standing by with more. Abhimanyu, take us to what we can now expect over the next week as far as the Commerce Minister's Washington visit goes.
India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal is in the United States, where he's going to meet the US Commerce Secretary and the US Trade Representative. Government sources have indicated that the political level meetings are going to assess the developments between both the countries with respect to the talks which have taken place since the past 2 months for a potential bilateral trade agreement which both the countries intend to sign. Also, the ministerial meetings intend to provide some political steer to the discussions which are going to be held after the ministerial level meetings, since India's negotiating team led by Chief Negotiator Rajesh Agrawal is also headed to the US, and from the 19th to the 22nd of May they are going to hold talks with their American counterparts. It remains to be seen what all is going to be on the table. Of course, issues pertaining to goods are going to be discussed for the first tranche of a bilateral trade agreement. It remains to be seen whether issues like technical barriers to trade or even non-tariff barriers are going to figure in the discussions, even as both the countries intend to utilize the window of opportunity between the 90-day pause which has been effected on the announcement of tariffs by the United States till the 9th of July.
Many thanks. The US House Republicans have proposed a law which would impose a tax of 5% on all remittances sent outside the country by immigrants. The House aims to pass the Immigrant Remittances Bill by the 26th of May. India is the world's top recipient of remittances, with $83 billion sent from individuals in other countries annually. Now, if the law is passed in the US, for every transfer of 1 lakh rupees, about 5,000 rupees will go to the United States federal government. But this is not law yet. It is something that has been proposed. And President Donald Trump has concluded his first official tour to West Asia, bagging investments worth more than $2 trillion. Trump hailed the Gulf nations for their deepening ties with the US. He also made his last stop in Abu Dhabi, where he participated in bilateral meetings at the presidential palace. He's also announced deals worth more than $200 billion during his visit today. Israel has stepped up its military operations in Gaza and West Bank. This comes a day after US President Trump floated his idea of making Gaza a freedom zone. Israeli forces have reportedly killed at least 143 Palestinians in Gaza in the last 24 hours. And the talks between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul concluding in less than 2 hours without any significant breakthrough. This was the first time that Russia and Ukraine held direct peace talks in more than 3 years, amidst pressure from the US. A Reuters report suggests that Moscow's demands were detached from reality. Earlier, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio had warned that without Russian President Putin and US President Trump, there may not be a breakthrough at all. And Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has claimed that Western nations are plotting to fracture the relationship between India, Russia and China. Speaking at an event, Lavrov said that policies of the West clearly are anti-Chinese and are pitting our neighbors against each other.
What is happening right now in the Asia-Pacific region, the West has begun to call it the Indo-Pacific region in order to give its policy a clear anti-Chinese direction, hoping to thereby additionally gain the opportunity to pit our great friends and neighbors, India and China, against each other. Recently, President Putin recalled that it's simply a divide-and-rule policy.
Well, that's Russia's foreign minister there. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. From all of us here, thanks very much for watching. But do stay tuned. The news will continue on CNBC TV 18. We're going to be back with a lot more.